Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to our Ask the Experts webinar. My name is Scott Price, and I'll be your host for today's session, along with Ariel De Silva. We'll be just facilitating for some of our experts. Our intention is to present real solutions that our team has developed for clients using Atlassian products, and we hope that you might be able to benefit from our expertise. And just start with a brief technical presentation will be our format, and we'll follow that up with some Q&A. And you can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A feature on your screen, and we'll do our best to address as many of your questions as possible. If you happen to ask a question that we don't have the answer to, we will research that and get back to you at a later date. And if we're not able to get to your question during the event, we will also follow up with you in that case as well. Please note that this session is being recorded, and the recording is going to be shared on our YouTube channel, along with any additional resources that our experts might mention during the call. And so today we're fortunate to have a panel of distinguished experts with us who are going to share their insights and answer your questions. And the topic for today is Jira hierarchy and project organization. And I'm going to let our experts introduce themselves at this time. So Bonnie, you want to lead us off?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I'm Bonnie Beyer, and I've been a consultant since 2019 for Atlassian tools and agile methodologies. Before that, I spent 20 some years in avionics, and I like to say that my mic drop moment is when that I wrote the software that lands the 737 on the autopilot. So that's, if you flew in a 737, I helped land you.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Vicky.
Hi, I'm Vicki Murphy. I am the Director of Solution Engineering for Valiantis. I have also been working with the Atlassian tools since about 2019, and I'm really passionate about some of the topics we're going to talk about here today. So I'm excited for you to hear Bonnie's presentation and hopefully answer a lot of your questions. And I'll throw it over to Dietmar.
Thanks, Vicky. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dietmar Dörschlag. I'm connecting in from Vancouver, Canada. It's great to be here today. I've been with Valiantis for 2 years, focusing on primarily Jira Service Management, but my background is actually in IT project, program, and portfolio management in both the private and the public sector. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. So thanks so much. Over to you, Don, I think.
Yes. Hi, my name is Don Jacobsmeyer, and I have been with Valiantis for about 2 years as well. Previous to that, I have a deep background in enterprise software development and infrastructure. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And we will transition now to the first slide of your presentation. And take it away, Bonnie.
Well, I love that picture because I've actually seen that castle. So when I saw it show up in the Microsoft image selection, it was like, oh, yeah, it's perfect. That is a big foundation. And really, when it comes to the Atlassian tools, there are 3 topics that I consider the foundational aspects for a system to be scalable. It's necessary to consider each of these when you're standing up a new system or when you're introducing any new changes to that system. And those are, of course, the first one is access and permissions. Who can access the system? What can they do in the system? What can they see? This is critical for obvious reasons. And when it's neglected, you get unexpected behaviors, and you could potentially get a data breach. I rarely have worked with a client where I haven't seen something that needs to be addressed within the access and permissions and project roles and how those all interweave with each other. The second, of course, is the data topology. And as one of our colleagues likes to say, data is king. Data is the new gold in our world. And so the data topology is, simply put, how the data is laid out in the system, how it interacts with other data or other systems or with users. And if there isn't an intentional design in how that data topology is set up in your Jira system, it's going to lead to issues with visibility, transparency, and your reporting. And this is a place where a lot of companies get into trouble where they think, why aren't we getting the value out of the tools that we were told that we'd get? And it's often the root cause is within the data topology. And then, of course, change management, how changes are communicated, how users are enabled with that through training and documentation, and then how they're supported. That change management is a critical aspect of any Jira system at scale. And you can go to the next slide. And so Jira hierarchy is something that people don't always recognize, but Jira software does provide the capability to have many layers of scale. It says 3 layers of scale. I don't know why I only had that there, but well, I know why, because out of the box, it just provides those 3 layers scale, where you have the epic at level 1, and you have the story, tasks, and bugs at level 0, and then you have the -1, the subtask level, the basement. But you also have, with Jira Premium, the ability to have additional layers of scale. You can have, I'm not even really sure what the limits of the number of layers of scale you can have. But for example, if you were following full safe, you might have initiatives down to capabilities, down to features, down to stories, down to tasks. So you would have a full 5-layer of scale there. And that Jira hierarchy is something that's a critical component of your data topology, understanding where your data resides and who accesses that data and how it interacts with your project management tools. Next slide. And so if you haven't seen it before, the configuration for that issue type hierarchy is found in the issue types section of the issue administration, and it's right at the top. So you can see in this screenshot that we have themes at level 3 and initiatives at level 2. To add levels, you simply give the name level a name, and then you map which issue types you want to have at that level. And when viewing the issue types list, you're also going to see that hierarchy level displayed there right next to where the related schemes are. So that's a very straightforward concept for your issue type hierarchy. And if you have Premium, you should know what the hierarchy in your system is, so that all of the work is parented up through from the subtasks to the stories, all the way up to whatever layers are at the higher level, whether they're initiatives or themes or whatever they're called at your organization, so that there's full transparency and visibility of all the work. Next slide. And then when I talk about project organization, a lot of people struggle with understanding what that means. And really the key question to ask is, what does a Jira project or a Jira project container represent in your system? There are many appropriate answers for that. It could be development teams, business teams, products, product lines, programs, portfolios, many different things. However, there is not, if there isn't a consistent definition of what a Jira project represents in your system, then the data topology is not well understood. And that will impact your reporting and impact the behaviors in the system, and you'll get unexpected results. So each of the project types that you define within your system would then also have shared schemes. All of the configuration schemes for issue types and workflows would be shared for each of those different project types. Perhaps all of the hardware teams, that's one of the project categories, they would have their workflow schemes and issue type schemes that are shared. So you don't end up with the wild, wild west in your configuration, which ultimately always leads to errors and unexpected results. So, and when the project organization is not well defined, that is truly the root cause for their inability to gain the value out of the reports and the real-time metrics and dashboards and extensions to project and portfolio management tools. It almost always dives right into that data topology issue. And so that's the end of the slides. I just wanted to introduce these topics, but we're happy to take any of your questions about this, best practices or definitions or areas of confusion.
All right, thank you, Bonnie, for that presentation. And if you have a question for the panel, please use your question and answer feature on Zoom. And Ariel will be managing the questions. So I'll toss it to you, Ariel.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone. This was a presentation.
I'm having a hard time hearing you, Ariel.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yep.
there we go.
Okay, sorry, everyone. Thanks for the presentation. It was great. We have a couple of questions from the chat. First one is, can you have multiple issue types at the higher levels of the hierarchy?
Yeah, I can jump in and take this one. This is one of the topics I'm pretty passionate about around this subject. The answer is technically yes, but it's good to think about should we in this case. So the tool will allow you to have multiple, the way it works in Jira, you'll create different issue types and you can put multiple at the same level of your hierarchy. However, thinking back to Bonnie's topic about data topology, this starts to create a really matrix system and a lot of if-then scenarios. And it also comes back to that idea of access. And a big thing we're always talking about is having a lot of transparency in your system can lead to a lot of valuable results. And so if I'm someone who has access to all of the different issue types across the system, it can get really confusing when I link what issue type to what type of parent, essentially. And so our recommendation is to try and be as simple as possible at that team level, that level 0 on one of Bonnie's first slides. That's where we're going to see a lot of variation. Depending on if you're working with software teams or business teams, you might have tasks, stories, bugs. We work with HR teams where issues are actually representing people, or you might be working with IT teams who are representing things like laptops and actual systems. A lot of variation at that level. When you start to go above, we really like to try and be simple above that and make it really like we're talking apples to apples across the organization. And so as we start to roll data up into our higher level initiatives and strategic goals of the organization, we should start to see less variation as we go up typically. I also wanted to loop in something that Bonnie brought up of how many levels can we have. So I like to say that there's no known limit. Atlassian says there's no limit. We haven't discovered a limit. However, when we start to get to 6 levels of work, so if you look at like this right-hand side, if we were starting to get up into 6 levels here, let's really start to think about our issue types representing real work items. Because what starts to happen when you start to get above the kind of 5, 6 level, we found it usually represents some type of placeholder for work. And then who's in charge of updating that? Who's in charge of moving it through the workflow and closing it out? Or is it just a duplicate of a layer above or below? And start to be really thoughtful about, are we really representing a piece of work that somebody is going to own and carry through this workflow? And all that circles back to getting value out of the tools and having metrics. If you have a bunch of placeholder work items that aren't getting closed out, you're not going to be able to understand your lead time, your velocity at any level of scale. So just some food for thought if you're starting to craft your hierarchy there.
Great, thanks, Vicky. I think the second one is regarding that as well, which is just confirming, do you have to have Jira Premium to have access to the higher levels than Epic?
So if you're working with Jira out of the box, yes, typically we will see people purchasing Jira Premium to start to build above. If you look in the left-hand corner of the screen now, above that Jira software blue column. And this is where you're going to be able to leverage Atlassian's, it used to be advanced roadmaps, but now the advanced planning functionality. If you are not ready to go to Premium for whatever reason, there are a couple of workarounds. You could leverage just different link types. This wouldn't wouldn't give you the hierarchical functions that Jira has, but it would allow you to see some relationship through filters or if you're connecting to a BI tool. And also something to think about if you already have or looking into Tempo's structure, it does also have some workarounds when it comes to different ways to link work items without necessarily having premium as well. I do think by and large, our recommendation would be if you are wanting to go above the Epic level, really explore premium. We see that being the most valuable option of those three.
Yeah, also with premium, you get the sandbox. And the sandbox is so critical for good governance.
Yeah. And Atlassian intelligence as well now too. And that is, I am so impressed with that. That's a topic for another day, but it is some really helpful functions to look into as well. So lots of benefits with premium. Thanks, Aria.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so next one, what workflows do you recommend on the higher level issue types?
I'll jump in on that one. Honestly, I would simply start with keep it simple, silly, because a 3-step workflow for those higher level issue types of to do, in progress, and done, or using whatever your starting and ending statuses are. You might be using completed and canceled. You might want to add a on hold or canceled. I say keep it simple for a reason, for a couple of reasons, really. The first reason is the higher level issue types, they represent a collection of work that's underneath them. And that collection of work underneath could be in varying states of the workflow. So it's very hard to necessarily marry that up to the higher level. But the second reason is probably the more common and reason. And executives are very well known for not keeping their Jira issues up to date. So, I mean, just look at your own system. How many Jira epics are in your system that are still sitting in the backlog or the to-do status, the first status in your workflow, while the underlying work is already in progress or complete? So if you're not managing that workflow at the epic level consistently, then the executives also will not manage the higher level work consistently either. So there are, though, some, if you have after work, like, for example, an epic or higher level issue type might have some post work that has to occur after all the underlying work is completed. That might be a really good use case for a more complex workflow for the higher level work. Maybe you have release notes or other deployment type activities for software development or marketing milestones that you want to track in that higher level workflow. And then, of course, Scaled Agile Framework, they have some Kanban board status recommendations. So if you're following one of the Agile at scale type methodologies, whether it's disciplined Agile or SAFe or one of the others, those disciplines also have some recommendation for those higher level workflows. But in general, I just say keep it simple.
Agreed on that. Thanks, Bonnie. Okay, we have another chat question, which is, we don't have Jira Premium, so we can't clone our epics. We typically list our issues, tasks with due dates and assignee for an epic in Excel, and then import a timeline with the lists of issues or tasks for the epic, in Confluence. Then we can create tickets for each task separately. Is there a quicker way to create multiple tasks?
Yeah, I can jump on this one. Whenever we're talking about the way the question is phrased, I'm thinking that you're wanting to repeatedly create the same group of tasks that will support different epics, like sort of like a checklist, if you will. So a couple things you could absolutely do. I like that you were saying that you put the list of tasks in Confluence. You mentioned that you create each task separately. Something to look at is you can create multiple tasks from a Confluence table in Jira at once. So if you're liking that method, you might look into trying to bulk create tasks via a table. You can put like the summary and the description there and bulk create those. As for actually cloning or copying, you might start to look into Jira automation. You do have access to automation in Jira Standard. There are limitations on the number of executions available. That's documented out on Atlassian's documentation. But if this is something that your team members are needing to do fairly regularly and it can cut down on or increase your productivity, we think that that's always a good use case for leveraging automation. I've been told recently it really shows how long I've been in the ecosystem because I still call it automation for Jira, but the automation available in Jira to everyone today. As you get up into premium, if you are able to, those AI functions, again, Atlassian Intelligence do have additional ways to leverage Atlassian Intelligence to create child tasks. So just if you're looking for kind of a business case to present to move into premium, you might explore that functionality as well. But those are the thoughts that come to mind off the top of my head that I've seen be successful. I'll open it to the team if anybody has seen anything else leveraged with your customers recently.
I can chime in on that real quick because I'm actually this week building a pretty complex automations for one of my clients. And what I want to say is automations for me is one of the coolest things that I've seen in the Atlassian ecosystem. It is really, really powerful. And to tag on to what Vicky said, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that you can use, of course, automation to enforce a streamlined process, right? Because you let Jira automation for Jira work on your behalf, and you let the system execute repetitive tasks on your behalf. And of course, if you do that, they're always done in the same manner. So you, of course, ensuring process consistency. It's really, really powerful. And what automation also allows you is it really enforces that Atlassian a foundational concept in the Atlassian ecosystem, which is cross-team collaboration. So for example, the automations that I'm building this week is for clients where an HR team works together in various HR processes with other teams. And you're using automation for that process consistency and governance across multiple teams. And you let, of course, Jira then work on your behalf rather than a human being having to execute that manually. And that's something I really, really like with automation. So I'm a big fan of automation. It's very powerful, and I really encourage you guys to use that in your Jira and GSM and also Confluence work that you're doing.
Perfect. Thanks for the answer, team. Dietmar, while I have you there, what are some of the best practices when building a workflow in Jira?
Well, let me tag on to what Bonnie said earlier. I think sometimes less is more, and sometimes keeping it simple is really important. So what I see with some of the clients that we're working is they have really complex workflows in place. And I'm saying, workflows that maybe have 15 or so statuses, and that can get really complex. So for me, building something that's simple, I'm a big proponent of user-centric design, is really, really important. So you want to really think through how many statuses do you really need? Sometimes less is more. The second point I'd like to point out is that you need to be, rather than just creating new statuses, which of course also speaks to the concept of governance. You could have multiple statuses that are actually duplicates of each other. Keep it clean, keep it crisp, reuse existing statuses is really, really important. And the last point I'd like to make on workflows is build it in a way that it's scalable, reusable, and sustainable. Because me coming from a project management background originally, I was always focused on, the project go live, whether or not this is 3, 6, 9 months out. But we need to build solutions, workflows that are sustainable by the team that inherits the solution for the long run, because people obviously need to support it.
Yeah, Dietmar, I was just thinking when you said that about the statuses, duplicate statuses. I don't know how many systems sorry about that. I don't know how many systems I've seen where they have canceled with 1 L, canceled with 2 L. They have done, they have complete, they have closed, they might have completed. I remember seeing a presentation at one of the Atlassian summits back when they were called summits, where there was a company that had eliminated 600 different statuses from their system. And how many different ways can you say the work is done? Or is it done, or is it done? So really, one of the things that I talk about in governance classes or in governance engagements is try to standardize on your starting statuses and your closing statuses so that you're limiting those. And then make sure you're reusing the ones in between, trying to keep them as generic as possible so that they can be used for multiple team types, multiple project category types.
Right. And another thing, if I may chime in real quick, Bonnie, that comes to mind for me is that, and I think this also speaks to really the trifecta of what we're doing, which is people, processes, and tools. The way we're building a workflow, meaning in the tool, Jira, JSM, is obviously indicative of the process that people will be using. So we have to have really clear definitions of what a status means, because a status is kind of a gate that you're going through, right? And everybody then needs to be in agreement on what that status actually represents. So to your point, we need to be clean on how we're naming a status, and then everybody needs to be understanding what that actually represents in the workflow. Ariel, back to you.
Thanks, Dietmar. Next one, Don. One of our attendees is still a bit confused on the concept of a project in Jira. Can you elaborate on this a bit?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It is a somewhat, nebulous concept because a project can be anything. And so some organizations even have sort of efforts or scopes of work that they refer to as a project that further complicates what are we talking about when we say a project. So in Jira, a project is a container of issues that has configuration to support the workflows, the permission schemes, any custom screens or transitions or other business logic that supports that project or that group of individuals doing the work that they do, right? So we always recommend that a project should be a long-lived container where people work. Technically, you can have it be a short-lived sort of scope-based effort, but you lose a lot of the value of the project container because the project container isn't just a place where people do work. It is also the place where your operational data lives. So if you want to be able to associate time tracking or reporting to any of these kind of projects, making sure that that project sticks around for a long time is really important, as opposed to having a project, doing some work, being done with the work and archiving it. You lose a lot of the historical value of a project. So one thing that I'll often tell clients that I work with is this should typically be based on departments or functions within the organization or teams of people. We've even had a client who tried to change their Jira project sort of container purpose in the spirit of Conway's Law, where in an organization, communication flows typically sort of track org chart, right? And so their org chart did not reflect their project hierarchy. And so they were trying to actually shift their project structure to be more in line with their org chart, which I think was a really sort of wise and savvy strategic move.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Next one. What's the best way to visualize the hierarchy of work?
Yeah, thanks, Ariel. I'll jump in on this one. So there's the out of the box, the most common way that we are seeing is upgrading into Jira Premium and leveraging the plans functionality. If you've been in the ecosystem for a minute, this is formerly advanced roadmaps, formerly portfolio for Jira. But it is the out of the box visualization tool for our hierarchy of work. It has a lot of great functionality around road mapping, the ability to group work based on teams, based on projects, Jira projects like we were talking, visualize assignees, even do some team level capacity management. You also get the ability to visualize your dependencies as well, which I know we aren't talking about a lot here, but that's a really fantastic piece of the plans. Outside of that, there are a couple of popular add-ons that are frequently used when people need just a little bit more functionality than what you may get out of plans. And that would be Tempo Structure that we mentioned earlier, or Big Picture, which is produced by a company called AppFire. And so those are the most popular options. Of course, if you're doing more of a scaled approach, scaled agile, or a scaled planning framework, there's also Atlassian's Jira Align tool. We don't have a presentation around those options today, but we do have another completely free webinar called the Strategic Portfolio Management webinar that Brianna has kindly put a link to in the chat. So if you want to check out what those visualizations look like, and we even do a sort of pro-con list, or what you get with each option, our team does a great job. And I believe the next one is coming up in January. So do feel free to check that out. Or there are recordings of past versions on YouTube as well. Thanks, Ariel. I'll throw it back to you.
So much, Vicky. Okay, next one. Do you have any recommendations on how to set up permissions in Jira? Dietmar?
Yeah, let me take that one. And I think, Bonnie, in one of your first slides, you had the topic of permissions, right? So let me start with this comment. I remember some time ago when I was starting for an Atlassian certification exam, I noticed that those exams were really heavy on permissions, and they're actually a little bit complex. And the reason for this is that permissions are multi-layered in the Atlassian ecosystem, and they're really important because permissions obviously speak to governance, and you have to really, really think this through. It's very powerful as to who has access to what information as multiple teams work together in a Jira JSM conference instance that could span thousands of users. So the first point I'd like to make is you really need to think it through before you implement it, and get all stakeholders involved in chiming in, so that you have a permission model that reflects your governance in your organizations. So a few principles on how you can use this is is obviously, again, the concept of a permission scheme, and we talked about schemes earlier today, I think. Use repeatable permission schemes that establish that, access that governance model, and map those schemes into your projects, the container of work where teams collaborate. So use repeatable permission schemes, I think, is the first principle that comes to mind for me. And then you have a lot of flexibility in how permissions can be set up. You could use groups. They are, by the way, mandatory for global permissions because they're very powerful, and groups can only be changed by the god of Jira, the org admin. And that's why we use groups for that. But then you have a lot of flexibility in managing permissions with roles, and you map roles, which of course could be reflective of job roles, job descriptions, into your permission scheme. And then the last thing I'd like to say is that there's also the concept of issue a security scheme, where you can actually manage who has access to a sensitive issue, a piece of work in a Jira project, based on a specific security scheme. Let's say you want to give only executives access to a sensitive topic, or only human resources, and you manage this through a security scheme that's mapped to a project. So in summary, it's a complex topic, and you really need to think it through, but it's really, really important. I think last year sometimes I did a video on that you find on our YouTube channel. maybe we can post it in the chat where sort of in a 15-minute demo talk about the concept of permissions. It's really important.
Yeah, I think she put that in the chat actually.
Oh, good. Okay.
One of the things I'll chime in on, add on to this, is that if you're a Jira admin and you haven't done so in the last year, that would be the first thing I would go audit, is what are your groups? What are your project roles? What are your default product access groups? What are your default project roles groups? And where do they insert themselves into the notifications and permission schemes and workflows? It's such a complex interweaving of all of these different things. It's always broken in some way or another. Every system I've ever seen, there's at least something broken in there. So that's something that should be audited at least once every year, if not more often.
Right. Thanks, Bonnie. Ariel, back to you.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, next one. How can you effectively use automation in Jira to improve team workflows?
I commented on it earlier. I can just maybe chime in one more time, keep it really quick, very simple. So I think the first thing for me that comes to mind is process consistency, because you're using automation based on a rule that you establish. Automations are also called rules in Jira or JSM. So you're ensuring the execution of a consistent process, which of course has to be agreed to and well defined. That's really important. You're doing things in a consistent manner. And maybe let me just use this example that I'm working on this week, which is we're using automation for teams to collaborate together. So the automation that I'm building this week is where we're building an HR onboarding process that is initiated by an HR team, and that then spins off various tasks that have to be fulfilled by various other teams, whatever teams are involved in onboarding employees. So you really let, again, Jira work on your behalf, Jira automation work on your behalf, and you're doing it in a consistent manner across various project teams. And that saves a lot of time because you let Jira do it for you. So automation in that regard ensures process consistency. It cuts down on manual work, and you let the system, the software work on your behalf. So I really, really do like that.
As we all.
I've seen
Thanks,
where
Mark.
some people, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I've seen where some systems, one of the use cases I really like to see on one of my clients was where they, each status spawned off a different subtask for different, the QA environment. When it went into the status that they cared about, it would spawn off a subtask for that engineer. And I've seen that work very well as well. You can use automations to create issues throughout the workflows, or you can use them to propagate fields from parents down to children. There's so many different use cases that I've seen that I like. So if you haven't used it, explore it in your sandbox.
It's very powerful.
Dietmar, we have a continuation question from the chat, which is, where did you say again we could go to find more about your automation? How to access and use it?
I need to check if we have content on that in our YouTube channel. We might. If we can find something, we can post it in the chat. But one thing on that note I'd like to point out is that what I really like about working in the Atlassian ecosystem is the fact that because the software is used by over 300,000 organizations globally, I think Atlassian is doing a great job providing you with templates. And automation, of course, comes with a template library. So the software is used in hundreds of industries, and Atlassian, I do think, is doing a great job collecting industry feedback and then providing you what they learn from customers via template library. So of course you can go into automation and spin up a template and use that as a starting point. So I encourage all my clients, as they're learning automation, go to the template library, spin it up, yes, in a sandbox, try it out. Just make sure you don't send a notification to every single member in your team. You're not picking friends, but templates for automation are very powerful.
While you were talking, Dietmar, I went ahead and found Atlassian has a good some good documentation on their automation as well. So we put a link to that in the chat. And like Dietmar mentioned, we do have a few videos on our YouTube channel about some automation rules we've built. And so you can search for those there. It's definitely not covering the basics. I'd start with Atlassian's documentation, but then maybe some inspiration of rules we've built over the years, some of which might even be templates at this point now, like Dietmar was saying.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you, Vicky.
it's been added to the chat also, the playlist for that.
Yeah, excellent.
Yep.
Okay, next one. What are the key differences between team managed and company managed projects in Jira?
Oh, I'll jump on this one as well. I think someone found my soapbox in the back of the closet. So the key difference at a high level between team managed and company managed is the administrative powers over the project. And so it's really important to know that team managed projects, which you can create team managed business as well as team managed software projects in Jira, the administration around the fields and around the workflow are all going to go to the project admin. And that could be your Jira administrator. It could also be someone who is on that specific team. And the idea is to give some autonomy to the teams here and also take some load off of the Atlassian administrator. The caveat to this is it starts to get us away from that shared schema that Bonnie and Dietmar have both been talking about. And we start to lose some ability of that idea of rolling up work together and having a similar data topology across our ecosystem if we break away and give each team the ability to do what they want to do. In my opinion, and I'll let the team chime in on this as well, I think team managed projects are good if you have a team that really is just needing a task list. They're not trying to follow any type of company policy. They really just need somewhere to take a very simple list of tasks and just manage on their own. If those tasks start to roll up into larger initiatives across the organization, or you have a need to have visibility into them at a high level, that's when you're probably going to want to switch to a company managed project so that you have that shared schema. You have the ability to, again, talking apples to apples so that your workflows are consistent across different, the similar types of teams so that you're rolling up work in the same manner. That only comes, or the ability to control that, I should say, comes with a company managed project where the administrator is, again, going to be your Jira or Atlassian admin. I know this is a hot topic, so does anybody else on the team have something they would like to add on this?
I would just add on that any organization at scale, larger than 500 people or so, really shouldn't be using team managed projects. One of the biggest issues isn't so much the administrative overhead of company managed versus team managed, though that's why a lot of people will use team managed projects, but it's the end user impact. There's a very negative end user impact on using company managed or team managed projects when they start creating fields or statuses or issue types that are named the same way as some of the company managed fields and some of the same issue types. When I go into a JQL search and I'm looking for skill set, maybe that's the name of the field, and I find that there's 5 different options for skill set, and I'm not sure which one to use, I have to add all 5 of them columns and see which one's not empty for the issue types that I care about. It causes a lot of end user confusion and struggles there, not just in JQL search, but also in many of your plugins, your plans and structure and all of those types of things. So I strongly recommend against using them myself. But
maybe, Bonnie, just a quick comment from my pre-Valiantis, pre-Atlassian experience. So when I had a pretty sizable PMO, project management office, we of course had a lot of projects that were happening in parallel. And one thing that was always really important to us was that you would have predictable outcomes, and predictable outcomes are achieved by a consistent process, right? And if you have 40 projects for the project teams who work in a very inconsistent way. Everybody does it their own way, meaning using a team managed project with completely ad hoc workflows, screens, data points, then you are not ensuring consistency. And that's why I really agree with what you just said, that we have company managed projects that ensure a consistent path towards the intended outcome. And I think it's the cost of team autonomy, team managed projects, at the expense of consistent outcomes. So we actually work with a number of clients where we're being asked to come in and clean up team managed projects because the clients realize that they really ran into governance challenges, and then they ask us to come in and migrate from team managed projects back to company managed projects, which can be done, but of course is laborious and time intensive.
Yeah.
This one touches a nerve with me as well. I've been trying to just sit here quietly, but I think that there's always this tension with Jira between standardization and autonomy. And the way Jira normally gets started is, some team finds it and tries it, and they love it, and then some other team, hears about it and wants to use it. But the people that are using it, start off with the keys to the kingdom. They're Jira administrators, and so you end up with a lot of people that can basically do whatever they want. Build their projects out the way they want. And so there's always this tension between standardization, which you need for proper reporting, especially, and then the need for team autonomy. And I think that's really why the team managed projects were created, was to try to give that autonomy. But to me, the company managed projects with automation, give you that need for standardization by being company managed at, critical database elements like issue types and workflows and fields, but then give people at the project level autonomy to do some things that they need to do with automation that give them kind of that unique feel or behavior that they're looking for.
Yeah, that struggle between a standardization and ability to customize it for my team, the best way to balance that is to have truly representative governance. If you have a governance board that is managed only by a couple of admins and one senior leader, that's not representative governance. You want people that are representing all of the different teams or organizations, depending on how large your company is, and often having people that are rotating in on a 6-month basis to help make those decisions of, we want this custom field. Well, we have this field that's named this, will that work? And everybody has those conversations and discusses it and works it out and makes a decision as a group representing their departments and their teams. So
just to add one more thing to that, I always like to say that the idea of scaling and standardization go hand in hand. And I think we often see that this idea of the wild, wild west implementation starts with really good intentions and starts when organizations might be smaller or really small use case for Jira. And so it doesn't feel like a burden to give every team what they want. But then suddenly you kind of reach this breaking point almost where we need this visualization across these teams. We need to be able to search for work, like you were saying, Bonnie, across these different teams. And now we have 4 fields that are named the same thing and 5 canceled statuses spelled different ways. And it's not making sense anymore. And like Dietmar was saying, that's a lot of times where we meet customers is they're at that breaking point and they need to clean up the system. And so just a word to the wise, if you're in that smaller box and your Jira isn't a huge environment yet, or your company isn't huge, it's really a good idea to start with some of the best practices we're talking about now. It will save a lot of potential struggle, pain, heartache down the road. And so just kind of think, always be configuring with the idea of scaling in mind, and you're going to need some standardization in there to be successful with that.
And it will save you money.
yeah.
The best bottom line, right? the best remark.
less gray hair too, I think.
Well, we all chimed in on that one. I guess it really was a hot. Ariel, back to you.
Sorry. So just to let you guys know, I've spent many hours on migration projects having to fix those kinds of projects from team managed to company managed. So there's also that. Okay, I do think we have time for one last question. How can dashboards be tailored for different audiences in Jira?
I'll take a stab at that. Dashboards can be really incredible if you know what to ask for. And so different groups of people or different roles have different things that they want to know. So the more cleanly you can articulate what do you want to know, the more powerful dashboards will be. So at a team level, you typically want to know, are we behind? Are we overworked? Do we anticipate delays? Are there, key types of issues or work or scope that we want to bubble up to the surface more easily? At a sort of team of teams or sort of a product or program management level, you typically want to answer slightly different versions of that, right? Do we have features or whole scopes of work that will be delayed? Do we have the capacity to do what we want to be able to do? Are we getting more bugs than we have historically? Do we need to hire more people, right? So the really powerful widgets are actually seemingly the simplest, but when you can create custom filters that speak into the question that you want answered, that creates a found set of issues that then you can visualize in a pie chart or even a list, bar charts. There's all kinds of ways to visualize it, but being really clear on what do you want to know is really the secret sauce. So for example, recently we're working with a group who's navigating capacity planning, and they have a number of different scopes and efforts, not Jira projects, but projects that they want to do. And they are allowing people to acknowledge that, hey, a particular resource type is needed for this scope. And they've got a couple different resource types. And so we've created a series of specific filters to bubble up, hey, these issues need some resourcing, right? And so that goes to a specific role. They have a whole resource team to make sure that all efforts have the right people. And so once those have been alleviated, they'll remove that field from the custom field. But the power of knowing exactly what you want to surface is a perfect example of where dashboards can be really helpful. If you just say, how's my team doing? How's my work doing? You don't typically get the benefits that dashboards can provide. And obviously there's all the classic, sort of software development reports like burn up, burn down, velocity, and those are great at a team or maybe above a team level. But there's a lot of other power and other things that is unique to your organization as long as you know what to ask for.
Yeah,
everyone has a different opinion. Bonnie, yeah, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's so good. That's such a great way to put it, because my three favorite gadgets are the filter results, the pie chart, and is it the issue statistics? Is that the one that you can do this by this? Those three, as long as you know what you're trying to display, you can often do it with just those three gadgets. It's just a matter of understanding what is it you want to, what information do you want, and what decisions is it trying to inform. So that's.
May I just give you a quick example on something we built for a client that just went live 3 weeks ago, and this was an organization with Jira Service Management, because of course dashboards are very much available and powerful in JSM, not only in Jira. And we built 20 dashboards for 20 different teams. Of course, the dashboards have consistency to them, right? And this related to service management. So we're measuring SLA performance, right? We are measuring workload, how tickets are being assigned to various team members. We're looking at ticket priority. We're looking at reached SLAs versus met SLAs. We're doing a ticket count, and the list goes on. And so I think each dashboard had 12 gadgets, and they were then, of course, all based on filters. So very powerful. I love dashboards. Like you can set them as a homepage. You log into Jira and they become your homepage, and the executive sponsor launches the dashboard every morning and it sees exactly how the teams are performing. So it's very, very powerful.
I want to
Ariel,
ask a
back to you.
question, follow up to that, maybe toward Vicky, because Vicky, I know you're really good with Atlassian analytics, and we've got a client that's migrating from data center to cloud, and we've kind of challenged them to think about not just moving dashboards over that they've been using, but maybe to rethink the reporting using analytics. And I wondered if you had a thought on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone who maybe isn't familiar with analytics, it is Atlassian's data analysis and visualization tool, starting to become quite similar to something like a Power BI or a Tableau. Still early days, but we're getting there. But it comes with Atlassian's data lake, which collects all of the data from your Atlassian products. You can also connect in data from external systems and share your Atlassian data to other business intelligence tools or systems if you need to. And we're really seeing it be quite a game changer. It is available only at the enterprise tier of your Atlassian products, but it is quite useful. It's giving organizations a lot more visibility into the data. And so the dashboards everybody's been talking about are really great, often at that team level. You can even get some executive dashboarding out of it. But a lot of times organizations will wind up using an add-on or something to make a lot more robust dashboarding. And now that Atlassian has introduced Atlassian Analytics to help with that. And so just the connectivity to the data, it's transformed data. So it's not just looking at, status IDs or having to translate anything. It's very user friendly. And it also has a lot of integration with tools like Confluence. You can display these charts over in a Confluence page as well. And so I wish we had time to pull up a visual, but I think Brianna put either our link to our webinar or maybe a video in the chat for you. We're really seeing it be quite useful with organizations who just need more robust dashboarding from teams up to the executive level. So we do have a webinar coming up in January, I believe, on Atlassian Analytics. So if you want to see more, highly recommend you check that out.
That's awesome. Thank you. And Ariel, I think that's all the questions, is it not?
Yep, all of those.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and thankfully, we were able to get through all the questions. We're not always able to do that. But if you think of something that you wish you'd have asked, feel free to reach out to us. My name, Scott Price and Ariel De Silva, were the hosts of the webinar. We would be happy to respond to questions you might have. Also, if you want to get in touch with one of the experts that was on the panel today, we can connect you with them if you need further information about a topic that they spoke to. Also, we have some upcoming events. These are going to be shared in your in the chat with you as well, so you can see that we have lots of topics coming up. This is just a portion of those going out through the first part of February, but we would love to have you join us in one of our future events. And we thank you once again for joining us, and we hope that you benefited from that. And we'd love to help you with any of the challenges you're facing with the Atlassian ecosystem at some time in the future. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to our guests.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take
Have a good
care.
day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.